Nyalche Chembur Toto Ningmi Chang, Donen Manam Chembur, Nyalche Dankara Dargan Santo, Shermar, Tumba Turje Chan La Ki Shiom Sar, Nishan Roar Zer Nishan Gamsa, Jabur Tuji Shan Yelaman, Jime Panzo Jala, Soran, Gonjo Toban Pora Shinjilo, Gonjo Toban Pora Shinjilo, Gonjo Toban Pora Shinjilo.
Profound and subtle Dharma is rarely encountered in eons. Now we hear and follow it. May we realize the Tathagata's meaning. To liberate beings, please generate bodhicitta before teaching.
I haven't taught the Shurangama Sutra for a few days. Today we will study it together again. In our study of the Shurangama Sutra, earlier there was Venerable Purna. Regarding his questions and answers with Shakyamuni Buddha, generally some commentaries say that his questions to the Buddha consisted of about 4 questions. In this chapter, 4 main questions are discussed. The most important question is, where does ignorance come from? At that time the Buddha answered this. He used a crazy person and the source of his confused mind to answer this question. This is the most primary one. Then Venerable Ananda also asked the Buddha a question, but some commentaries say that Ananda mainly had one question for the Buddha. You should all remember from earlier, Venerable Ananda said that the Buddha previously taught that everything arises from causes and conditions, because arising from causes and conditions is quite reasonable, including myself, Sariputra, Maudgalyana and Subhuti. Many sages relied on causes and conditions to extinguish ignorance and then manifest wisdom and attain sagehood. So this is acceptable, but now you say it is neither causes and conditions nor spontaneity. Such a principle seems somewhat unreasonable. So at this time the Buddha also previously used the parable of Yajnadatta. At that time we also asked everyone to remember that Yajnadatta is quite special. He is a character here. From his parable actually both causes and conditions and spontaneity are a kind of idle speculation. What we discussed earlier is that through his parable it is actually a kind of idle speculation. Today we will continue right from there. That is why I said that once the 3 conditions are eliminated, the enlightened mind is revealed. Next the Buddha continues with Venerable Ananda. Now it is Ananda's turn to appear. At this time the Buddha says, because earlier, through the parable of Yajnadatta, it was explained that actually the mad nature is entirely based on confusion. It has no beginning or end. It is also a kind of idle speculation. Therefore the Buddha says, I said that once the 3 conditions are eliminated, regarding these 3 conditions, we explained earlier in a broad sense, the material world, the sentient world, and the causes and conditions of karmic retribution. Speaking from here, we also just mentioned killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct. If these 3 conditions are eliminated, actually, the eliminated here means truly recognizing their essential nature, including killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct. Actually, there is also nothing to be grasped and nothing to be rejected. It is such a principle. So after they are eliminated in this way, our true Bodhi mind, the Bodhi mind here should be the most profound ultimate Bodhi mind, will naturally manifest. Therefore, because the 3 conditions are eliminated, the Bodhi mind naturally arises. However, such a Bodhi mind is not a Bodhi mind subject to arising and perishing. Below, it explains that this Bodhi mind is neither from causes and conditions nor from spontaneity. It is not produced by causes and conditions. It is not produced by spontaneity. Because regarding Ananda's question, he felt that arising from causes and conditions is reasonable. He himself attained realization relying on this. But as for arising spontaneously, that would be no different from the non-Buddhists. So it shouldn't be naturally produced. He felt that arising from causes and conditions is correct. Arising spontaneously is unreasonable. But the Buddha is about to explain that actually whether it is arising from causes and conditions or arising spontaneously, in conventional truth, both of these exist. There are permanent things too. There is also arising from causes and conditions, but in true ultimate reality, both of these are idle speculation and unreasonable. He mainly wants to explain this principle to him. Next it says, if you were to say that the enlightened mind comes into being with the cessation of the mind that arises and perishes, then you would be saying that the enlightened mind too is subject to arising and perishing. In truth, the effortless path to enlightenment is the ending of both arising and perishing. This is the principle of not arising from causes and conditions. He says here, the true Bodhi mind is actually, if the Bodhi mind truly arises, then arising and perishing, the mind of arising and the mind of perishing, are extinguished. The Bodhi mind is not produced by the causes and conditions of arising and perishing. Such a mind of continuous arising and perishing does not exist. It is without arising and without perishing. The cessation of the mind that arises and perishes, then you would be saying that the enlightened mind too is subject to arising and perishing. The arising and perishing we speak of here are merely spoken in a relative sense. There is no real arising and perishing. Because within the true Bodhi mind, arising cannot be established, and perishing cannot be established either. It is merely a figure of speech. It is merely just an idle speculation. The effortless path to enlightenment is the ending of both arising and perishing. Actually, both arising and perishing have already been completely extinguished. Both of these have already been purified. If they are purified, this is the true effortless path, because the effortless path is actually, as some commentaries explain, free from all mental fabrication, or you could say it is free from all words and thoughts, language and conceptual thinking. There is also the so-called Great Shurangama Samadhi. It is the most ultimate state. Therefore, Ananda, the arising from causes and conditions that you yourself believe in, actually such arising and perishing are mere delusions, mere falsehoods. True arising and perishing actually do not exist. So here he explains to Ananda that your so-called idea of Bodhi arising through arising and perishing is actually unreasonable. Then the next paragraph explains that arising naturally is unreasonable. It is not produced naturally. Suppose further that it is possible that the enlightened mind could come into being on its own, then it should be clear that it would come into being only with the perishing of the mind that comes into being and ceases to be, but that is still a coming into being and ceasing to be. If you say it is like what the non-Buddhists acknowledge, a kind of natural arising, then this is very clear. With such natural arising, then it is produced by the natural mind. If it is produced by the natural mind, the mind of arising and perishing must perish. If you have a true natural mind that is to arise, if there is a natural arising, then it is very clear, very obvious. The natural mind arises. If the natural mind arises, then our mind of continuous arising and perishing should be extinguished. The mind of arising and perishing is not the effortless path, but that is still a coming into being and ceasing to be. This is also a mind of arising and perishing. Because if there is a natural Bodhi mind, then the mind of arising and perishing has already perished. If the mind of arising and perishing has already perished, then in reality your so-called natural ultimately becomes a mind of arising and perishing. It is also a dharma of arising and perishing. It is not that it is natural, because after your mind of arising and perishing is completely extinguished, the natural mind clearly manifests. Such a process is actually not the effortless or true path either. This is also unreasonable. How is it unreasonable? He continues to explain below. The natural mind cannot be spoken of in this way. Do not think that something which does not arise and perish must therefore be said to have come into being on its own. Generally speaking, as the name implies, everyone knows what is natural. Actually, it is something without arising and without perishing. This is true nature, what is called natural. In the world there is also a twofold division between the natural and the non-natural. What is it like? For example, a mixture is said to be created when components with different attributes are combined. What cannot be mixed together is said to be something that is fundamental. Just as we speak from a worldly perspective, worldly people also acknowledge that when two or multiple things are mixed together, combined into one entity, this is called a mixed nature, not a natural property. For example, milk and tea mixed together are called milk tea. Then, into the milk and water, if you add a little tea and add a little butter, it's called butter tea. This is called being formed through mixing, right? This is also acknowledged by worldly people. When several different things are mixed together, this is called being formed through mixing. In reality, this is not natural. What cannot be mixed together, if it is not mixed, it is called a fundamental nature. For example, a natural crystal. This is a kind of natural stone. This is a natural jewel. In our world as well, what is called natural might contain many impurities inside. Nowadays, according to some mineralogical theories, for any material the inside is not purely natural, there are various mixtures inside. But in terms of the conventional language of worldly people, they feel that if it is natural, it is not man-made. It is not a mixture of various causes and conditions. It naturally formed on its own. This is called a natural property. Our mind is also natural, or leisurely, or clear. We always describe it this way. Therefore, this mind of our original face is often referred to using worldly terms. We also said earlier, sometimes it's called fundamental, sometimes clear. In Dzogchen it's called evident, stark, luminous, blazing, so many terms ending in ran. Actually it carries a sense of being natural, but within the natural state there are also different special characteristics. So if it is not formed through mixing, actually this is the so-called fundamental nature. This concludes the above. What was discussed earlier is that such a Bodhi mind is not naturally produced. He wants Ananda to understand this as well. The natural mentioned later refers to that which is without arising and perishing. Worldly people also acknowledge that there are natural and non-natural things. Next, actually a dharma truly free from idle speculation transcends all mixed and natural things. This alone is the dharma without idle speculation. Because earlier it was said, Ananda, everything you acknowledge is idle speculation. Including what you think is natural, this is also idle speculation. Including what you think is a dharma of causes and conditions, this is also idle speculation. So the idle speculation here means that anything with extremes, anything that has substantial existence, is all idle speculation. We have studied the fundamental verses on the middle way, and the commentary on the adornment of the middle way. This is of great help in understanding the Shurangama Sutra, because some of the reasoning in there, including that in our entire world, there is not a single substantially existing dharma. This statement is very important. Mipam Rinpoche, in his commentary on the adornment of the middle way, also repeatedly emphasized this. This principle is very important. Next, it explains what is meant by transcending idle speculation. In fact, what is fundamental is not fundamental. What is mixed is not in fact a mixture. Neither what is mixed nor what is fundamental exists. Yet the non-existence of the mixed and the fundamental must also be negated. Only then do we have a teaching that may be called dharma, that is more than mere speculation. Actually, for those who haven't studied Madhyamaka, or who haven't studied Tantric teachings, I don't know how they teach the Shurangama Sutra. It must be a bit, why is there no one teaching the Shurangama Sutra nowadays? It's probably because it is indeed difficult to teach. I hope that our fellow practitioners in the future, if we truly complete this study successfully, you must propagate it in the future. As for propagating it, I think many of us should have the ability to do so, because everyone has studied Madhyamaka, studied Buddhist logic and studied Dzogchen. In this way, It seems that when explaining the principles within it, one shouldn't just speak them superficially. One should truly understand what is being said, otherwise one won't know what is being said at all. The Shurangama Sutra is sometimes difficult to teach. The meaning is also difficult to explain. The words are very beautiful, but one doesn't understand them. Didn't someone say earlier the other day that every word is beautiful, but they really don't understand them? It says here, in fact what is fundamental is not fundamental, what is mixed is not in fact a mixture, it's not as Ananda said that it must be naturally produced. Actually, as for natural, if we look at it from the perspective of true essence, it is not natural. Because natural is an idle speculation, there is no truly natural dharma that can be established, there is nothing permanent, nor is there anything impermanent. There are no substantially existing dharmas either. Therefore, regarding the so-called natural, actually when its essence is observed, it is non-natural. The same principle applies to mixed. As for the mixing of causes and conditions, that is merely a statement made without observation. If you truly investigate it, mixing is impossible to achieve. Do they merge into one entity, or are they not one entity? Do they touch, or do they not touch? In this way, mixing is also merely idle speculation. Actually, there is no mixing. There is nothing to be mixed either. On the surface we see two people collaborating. We might be holding some cooperative meeting now, or we talk about harmony and unity, we say things like this. But this is the delusional idle speculation of conventional language. When we truly investigate it, how do they combine? I just mentioned butter tea. How do the ingredients of butter tea mix together? There is no way. The essence of the butter, the essence of the tea, the essence of the water, if you examine them one by one, how do they mix? True mixing cannot be established either. Both the mixed and the fundamental must be left behind. As just mentioned, mixing cannot be established, the natural cannot be established either. In their actual essence, both have already been transcended. Is there a dharma that exists apart from these two? No, there is not. As for mixing and the natural, them gathering together does not exist either. There is nothing apart from these two either. Generally we say it is not existence, not non-existence, not neither of the two, and not both. When transcending the four extremes, it is not existence, nor is it non-existence. It is not both existence and non-existence, nor is it neither existence nor non-existence. If all four extremes have been refuted, then there is virtually no way for it to exist. If we have an existence, it must either exist in the manner of existence, or exist in the manner of non-existence, or exist in the manner of both existence and non-existence, or exist in the manner of neither of the two. If these four extremes have all been refuted, where could it exist? By the same reasoning, regarding the issue raised by Ananda about the natural and causes and conditions, either both exist or one exists, or it exists in a manner that is neither of the two, or it exists in another manner apart from these two. In another manner apart from these two. Therefore, in some commentaries from the Han region, their single-layer refutation, double-layer refutation, and dual illumination refutation, there are some different explanatory methods, but it can also be explained this way. However, looking at the terminology, when the Buddha answers Ananda's question below, Ananda always believes that there is something of causes and conditions or something natural. But when we observe with reasoning, these are all idle speculations. Ultimately, one transcends all of these, whether it is these four extremes or 8 extremes as well. For example, mixed, not mixed, both mixed and not mixed, and neither mixed nor not mixed. On the aspect of causes, conditions, and mixing, there are 4 aspects to observe, observing through the 4 extremes. Then natural and non-natural. It is not natural and it is not non-natural. It is not both and it is not neither. On the aspect of the natural, there are also 4 aspects to observe. By observing through these 8 aspects in this way, ultimately one transcends idle speculation. It should be like this. Only then do we have a teaching that may be called, in this way, through the above method of observation, only then can it be called what? Dharma that is more than mere speculation. Indeed, just as it says in the Mahayana Ganavyuha Sutra, the realm of inner realization transcends the sphere of all language. This realm of inner realization transcends all, meaning the entire sphere of language. Indeed, just as it is said here, it is a state that truly transcends the 4 extremes and 8 fabrications. At the time of realization, language has no way to point to it or express it. The above discusses mixing and spontaneity. Through analysis, neither of these 2 can be established. Next, he is going to reprimand Venerable Ananda again. The Buddha says, "You do not practice." Today, among many people, he also begins to criticize him. Fortunately, Ananda probably has a better temper. Otherwise, if he were like some of the volunteer workers here, with a bad temper, he would have left long ago. So I still need to say a few words about the volunteer workers here. Either you do not volunteer, or if you do volunteer work, do not treat losing your temper as a kind of merit. Some people, over just a little thing, after a few words, immediately fly into a rage. This is very bad. Perhaps previously some individual volunteer workers here were often very arrogant on different occasions, and frequently spoke like this. Perhaps because of this reason, so our volunteer workers, if you want to do volunteer work, doing volunteer work for the Sangha, whether your state of mind is good or bad, you should go with a bit of patience. If you really have no way arguing with this person today and arguing with that person tomorrow, for this kind of person, it seems to bring no dignity to our entire Mara subduing land here. They all think, what are you practicing? You don't have the slightest ability to tame your mind. If you are particularly irritable, you still need to pay attention to this. You see, Venerable Ananda is, although it was the Buddha actually at that time, the Buddha and the disciples must have appeared to be human on the surface. No matter what the Buddha said, Ananda would never get angry. He says awakening and nirvana are still so distant. This is spoken to Ananda. Now, after all this discussion regarding this awakening and nirvana, attaining the fruition of awakening and nirvana, for you, Ananda, it is still exceptionally out of reach, very distant. It seems that to the Buddha right now, the questions he asks are becoming increasingly wide of the mark. Therefore, he directly tells him, if you want to attain Bodhi now, there's nothing to even think about. There is basically no hope. It is very distant, that you will have to spend eons in difficult practice before you will reach them. Your ability to memorize all 12 types of discourse spoken by the Buddha and proclaimed by the thus come ones in all 10 directions, with their pure and wondrous truths, innumerable as the river Ganges sands, has merely helped you to indulge in idle speculation. Although you have experienced, why is it so distant for you? Because you have not gone through many eons of diligent practice. You have not diligently practiced and verified it. Because of this reason, although you, Ananda, are foremost in erudition, so you have the dharani of non-forgetting. You can have excellent memory and retention. You can retain the pure and wondrous truths of the 12 types of discourse of the thus come ones, in all 10 directions. These profound, vast and pure wondrous truths, although you remember them very clearly, and these wondrous truths are as numerous as the sands of the Ganges, but all of these are merely idle speculations that only give you a little benefit. Sometimes nowadays our listening and contemplating are very good, but if our actual practice is particularly poor, because Ananda, lifetime after lifetime for many lifetimes, what was he accustomed to? He was accustomed to being a thinker. In our current terms, he was quite good at studying theory. Ananda was foremost in erudition, possessing extensive knowledge. His actual practice was relatively poor. Honestly speaking, Ananda is just like some of us. We might speak very logically and impressively, able to talk about anything, but they are not doers. When it comes to action, sometimes the words spoken from their mouths make people around the world happy. But when it comes to their actions, even their own mothers are broken-hearted. We used to have this saying, when speaking verbally, they make people of the world feel, wow, this person is truly amazing. Actually, when they really act, let alone others, even their own mothers are broken-hearted. Wow, my son, my daughter is doing so poorly. Generally, a mother is the closest person. She wouldn't be particularly heartbroken unless there were major faults. She always thinks her own child is very good. So Ananda is also like this. You see, the Buddha says, although you have extensive knowledge and erudition, and remember all 12 types of discourse clearly, and can recite these sutras and treatises as numerous as Ganges sands fluently backwards, which is exceptionally good, but you do not have excellent practice and realization. It has all turned into idle speculation with only slight benefit. Therefore we must pay attention to this sentence. All of our fellow practitioners engaged in listening and contemplating here. Indeed, if we actually compare ourselves with Venerable Ananda and the others, if we compare, some of us were ordained very late, and our worldly habitual tendencies are also extremely heavy. Now, having only a few years of listening, contemplating and practicing, this doesn't even count as extensive knowledge and erudition. We shouldn't be arrogant ourselves. Oh, I have studied a few treatises. You look at the Buddha's sutras in our Tibetan Tripitaka, there are 108 volumes. Of those 108 volumes, we truly haven't even finished studying 8 volumes. Those other 100 volumes are still sitting there, so sometimes looking at the Buddha's wisdom, it is truly inconceivable. There are also many kept in the Naga palaces and in the heavenly realms. Additionally, besides the texts in the Tibetan tradition, there are even more in the Han Buddhism tradition. In this case, we truly cannot claim to have extensive knowledge and erudition. We shouldn't think ourselves to be so. There probably isn't anyone like that among us, right? But nowadays, some people, especially if they have attended university before, feel they are truly very great. But our wisdom is not necessarily great. Perhaps it's just that we have completed a few theories from the curriculum. At this time it says here, the Buddha here is very dissatisfied with Ananda's state. Although you recite well, although you remember well, it is all idle speculation. Certainly you have the ability to speak about causes and conditions, and about things coming into being on their own, with such understanding that people call you foremost in erudition. Next he continues to refute him. Although the words you speak verbally, whether you speak of causes and conditions or spontaneity, are spoken with definitive clarity and perfect logic, when you speak of causes and conditions, whether it's co-emergent causes or concurrent causes, you can probably explain the various causes very well. If you speak of spontaneity, it is the same, the permanent natural state or the eternally unchanging natural state. You can probably explain it very well. Whether it's spontaneity or causes and conditions, you explain these aspects very well theoretically. Because of this, the human world calls you foremost in erudition. You see, among all the 10 great disciples of Shakyamuni Buddha, for Ananda to ultimately be called foremost in erudition is still quite remarkable. He himself was also very diligent. This aspect is certainly commendable. But the Buddha didn't see it that way, so he began to reprimand him in the great assembly. Yet despite your many eons of accumulated learning, you were not able to escape your difficulty with the young Matangi woman. He says, with your extensive knowledge and erudition spanning many lifetimes and eons, continuously accumulating learning, continuously reinforcing it, wanting to hear more in this life, and wanting to hear more in the next life, hearing more in the first half of life, and hearing more in the second half of life. Actually, some of us really do have this kind of habit. We listen to teachings every day, study treatises every day, and read books every day. We don't know how our past life was, but in this life we keep accumulating knowledge, keep listening. But when you truly encounter a situation, the Buddha says, because although you are erudite, you still could not avoid this difficulty with the young Matangi woman. Regarding the young Matangi woman, you didn't have the slightest samadhi. Therefore, if one's practice is poor, ultimately facing adverse conditions and afflictions, it ends up exactly like this. Why did you need me to recite the Shurangama Mantra for you? In the young Matangi woman's heart, the fires of lust were extinguished, and instantly she became a sage who is free of rebirth. Now she has joined a group of vigorous practitioners of my Dharma. In her, the river of love has gone dry, and so now you are free of her. If you had been even a little bit better, why would you have needed me to recite the Buddha-crowned Shurangama Mantra? To make the fires of lust within the young Matangi woman's mind stream suddenly cease, completely extinguishing them in an instant. In the end, the young Matangi woman also attained the fruition of a non-returner, the fruition of a Nagamin. Now, within my Dharma, it should be said that the young Matanga woman has joined a group of vigorous practitioners. In some commentaries from the Han region, they depict the forest of vigor as an actual forest, a forest where many monastics are sitting in meditation. But as for the young Matangi woman, my eyes aren't so good now either. No matter how I look at it, I can't recognize how she is being vigorous in there. Anyway, in the Tibetan translation, forest of vigor is not phrased that way. It says, her power of vigor is highly successful, that she is exceptionally vigorous. The meaning of forest of vigor is that within my Dharma, she is an exceptionally vigorous, outstanding practitioner. Because of this, she has completely dried up the river of love. At that time, her craving and desire were exceedingly severe. Everyone knows that when we first started teaching the Shurangama Sutra, at that time when she saw Ananda, wasn't it in the Matangi Sutra, which I later translated into Tibetan? Also known as the Sardula Karnavadana Sutra, it is also explained in there. At that time, the young Matangi woman's passionate love was extremely severe. Whether sitting or otherwise, she was constantly thinking of Ananda. Whether in dreams or in reality, all her fantasies were filled with nothing but Ananda. She couldn't think of anything else. It was extremely severe. Her love was burning her mind stream with extreme severity. But later, Ananda had no way out. His wisdom of extensive learning was of no use at all. Then, the Buddha's Shurangama Mantra, this mantra of his, we will also discuss the blessings of the Shurangama Mantra later. Therefore, the Shurangama Mantra, the word mantra, the commentary pointing to the palm of the Shurangama Sutra, says it means breaking through obstacles, removing obstacles. The meaning of a mantra is also to break through obstacles. I think this time, with everyone reciting the mantra and reciting the 7-line prayer, through practice, many people might still have such experiences of blessing. I feel that every year when it's time for retreat, I often have matters requiring me to go out. This time I basically have a large amount of time. Indeed, such a retreat is still, because usually you don't have such ample time. We have to attend classes, do volunteer work, attend meetings, and so on. With this retreat, basically most of the time can be used to cultivate bodhicitta on this. Therefore, we still need to value actual practice. This is very important. Of course, while valuing practice, we shouldn't fall too far into extremes either. Some of our Dharma masters are like that too, thinking everything else, all listening and contemplating of theory, must be completely severed, and saying things about verifying one's own enlightenment. Regarding these verifications of enlightenment, we currently don't even dare to talk about enlightenment or verification. But this is probably just rumors passing around. Sometimes when our behavior goes a bit overboard, there is a good side and there are also some bad sides. But fundamentally, adhering to everyone's normal conventional rules and not overstepping them is very important. For all the Khenpos and Khenmos, I think it is the same. Each of our states is different. Some are extremely diligent, some are good at actual practice, and some are good at listening and contemplating. It should be like this, but one needs to look at oneself. We have a saying, whatever you do, it is very important to look at the behavior of your neighbors. So sometimes it should be like this. Therefore our practice now is also very important. Practice. For this reason, because relying on the Buddha like this, ultimately the young Matangi woman had already attained the Anagamine fruition, making you liberated. Haven't you been liberated? If the young Matanga woman hadn't had the Buddha's blessing, if she hadn't attained the fruition of a non-returner, she would be pestering you every day. How much suffering would you endure? Then the Buddha says, do you know? Your practice is poor. Originally, Ananda had a lot of prestige among the Sangha, but the Buddha often stimulated him, starting with, do you remember clearly, taking out his weak spot, his pain point, bringing up his wound again, and sprinkling a little salt on the wound to let him feel it. So these worldly pleasures, can you truly sever them? Below, an analogy is used to explain the importance of practice. Therefore, Ananda, the many eons you have spent committing to memory the thus come one's esoteric, inconceivable, wondrous, and majestic Dharma are not equal to a single day spent cultivating karma that is free of outflows and is far removed from the two worldly torments of hate and love. So he tells Venerable Ananda, although you have spent many lifetimes and eons holding the thus come one's esoteric, profound, vast, inconceivable, and wondrously majestic Dharma, such profound and subtle Dharmas, these Dharmas of the thus come one, you have remembered them very clearly for many lifetimes and eons. But this is not as good as spending a single day cultivating the Dharma, free of outflows, truly cultivating emptiness. This is truly the case for us as well. We still should, every day, even if it's just before and after class each day, sit for a few minutes. We must be able to apply the Dharma we practice every day. If you can't apply it and have no experiential response, sometimes even reciting mantras like Om Benza Sato Hum, and listening to teachings, listening to one today and another tomorrow, in this way having listened countless times and constantly chattering away when explaining to others, but in reality your own mind stream remains exactly the same as before. So it says here, instead of holding the thus come one's wondrously majestic Dharma for many lifetimes and eons, it is better to practice for a single day. After practicing, you will definitely be far removed from the worldly torments of love and hate, anger and greed, and the suffering brought by greed and anger. If you truly have a little practice, then worldly love or anger will not be able to harm you. I remember somewhere Mr. Nanhuai Chin said, if we practice Zen meditation, the wondrously indescribable bliss brought by meditative concentration far exceeds any flawed worldly love between men and women, and that kind of pleasure. It is also stated in the Vinaya Sutra, the pleasures of the 5 worldly desires, or even the pleasures of all the heavens, the pleasures of the 5 worldly desires in the world, or the pleasures of all the heavens, the celestial beings, if compared to the bliss of the exhaustion of craving, they do not amount to even 1,000th of it. This means that the comfort and joy of the 5 worldly desires and the pleasures of celestial beings, if compared with the bliss of the exhaustion of craving, where craving is completely extinguished, they do not even amount to 1,000th of it. This is indeed true. Nagarjuna's letter to a friend also has quite similar teachings. We worldly people think that perhaps worldly things, including so-called love and emotions, are particularly joyful, but for example, worldly people often think that romantic love is very great. Actually, it is quite great, but it is also the greatest source of suffering. In human life, it brings the most suffering because of the suffering brought by this worldly love. Therefore, the happiness it brings and the suffering it brings, if we were to truly weigh them on a scale, the suffering it brings would certainly weigh the most. If we truly, through Zen meditation, through actual practice, come to recognize our true nature, then all the flawed worldly love, or flawed worldly pleasures, all of these completely lose any meaning and value. Next, he uses an analogy. The Buddha tells him, urging him to practice well. Your extensive knowledge is not as good as practicing for a single day. Your extensive learning accumulated over many lifetimes and eons is not as effective as practicing for one day. This is the meaning. The young Matangi woman has always been a courtesan, and yet her love and desire were dispelled by the spiritual power of the mantra. Now she is a nun named Prakti. He gives two examples here, two examples that are related to them. What is the first one? The young Matangi woman. The young Matangi woman, she was a Brahmin woman. In many of her past lives she made her living through prostitution. Her habitual tendencies of sexual misconduct were probably very heavy. Although she was a Brahmin woman, she had still been a courtesan. In this case later, through the spiritual power of the Buddha's mantra and her own power of vigor, all her craving was completely dispelled. The romantic love completely vanished. So later, within the Buddha's Dharma, she was called the nun Prakti. When she was a laywoman, her name was probably also nature. Later, her name was not even changed, like in the Chinese Han Buddhism tradition. A lay name is changed into a monastic name. But now she has already become such a well-behaved nun. Now wherever she sees Ananda, she completely ignores him. She herself has attained a very high state of realization, unlike before. When going to fetch water, she would run over there. When begging for alms, she would run over there too, constantly following him. It is no longer like that, including going into the male practitioner's monastery, making it extremely difficult for Ananda in the end. But ultimately, when she truly recognized the essence of love, after recognizing it finally within Shakyamuni Buddha's teachings, she became a long time ago. National Master Yulin was also like this. At the very beginning it was very troublesome. Later liberation was attained. What was her name? Princess Jen. There is also another one, Rahula's mother. The Buddha also calls her Rahula's mother. He doesn't directly say. Nowadays, some of our lay practitioners also say the child's father, the child's mother. Then the Buddha says, she and Rahula's mother, Yasodhara, have both become aware of their previous lives, so she knows that, lifetime after lifetime, love has brought immeasurable suffering. The Prince Yicheng previously, he and the Brahmin woman made a vow together. From then on, lifetime after lifetime, she would not create obstacles on his path to awakening. At that time she offered flowers to Dipamkara Buddha. Didn't we previously specifically perform a play about this when teaching the extensive biography of the lives of Buddha? She is also like this. Yasodhara is also like this. Later she awakened to her own past lives, lifetime after lifetime because of love. It brought countless sufferings. Because of this reason, she later began to practice, and ultimately, she also received the Buddha's prediction. With one thought of cultivating the good that is free of outflows, later, with one thought of cultivating the good that is free of outflows. Because of this reason, among the two of them, some have already attained the first dhyana. Just now, the young Matangi woman attained the fruition of a non-returner. Therefore she left behind the entanglement of afflictions, and some of them have received predictions. This should be what is described in the Lotus Sutra. At that time, receiving a prediction before a Buddha, the thus come one endowed with tens of millions of radiant marks. In the future, she will also become a thus come one. Yasodhara also has this prediction for the future. Therefore, through practice, these two are very clear examples. Through practice, one has already attained the fruition of a non-returner, and the other has received the prediction of becoming a thus come one in the future. So among women there are still many. The Buddha mentions here one is the young Matangi woman. At the very beginning, her afflictions were very heavy. She brought a lot of trouble to Ananda, Everyone also felt she was particularly terrifying. Then, as for Yasodhara, relatively speaking, from reading biographies, it might not be quite like that, but actually lifetime after lifetime she had many habitual tendencies in this regard that were quite severe. But later, encountering the Buddha and encountering the Dharma, their mind streams were also able to attain realization. In the past, the Dakini Yeshe Tsogyal, there is this biography, right, from the Tertan masters. Now there is also a Chinese translation, including one in traditional Chinese characters. It is also mentioned inside. Actually, the Dakini Yeshe Tsogyal, she was not only a very special woman from a young age, her appearance was also exceptionally beautiful. Many princes began to feel a special kind of. In order to win her, many small kingdoms even started wars. Later, the larger kingdom at that time, Tubo, King Trisong Detsen took her as his queen. At this time, outwardly she manifested as extremely beautiful. But more importantly, later, after Guru Rinpoche entered Tibetan region, she was offered to him as his consort. But the most significant characteristic of Dakini Yeshe Tsogyal is that she was no ordinary woman. She had no afflictions, and even more importantly, she was able to retain all the teachings of Guru Rinpoche. Consort in Tibetan is Rigma. She could retain all of Guru Rinpoche's teachings with the Dharani of non-forgetting. Therefore, in many Terma teachings, the Dharma taught later by Guru Rinpoche, she remembered all of it with absolute clarity, and then entrusted it to the 8 classes of gods and Nagas, and entrusted it to the Dharma protectors. All of it was recorded by her. She simply committed it to her heart. Therefore, at the end of many Terma texts, it says Yeshe Tsogyal, who attained the Dharani of non-forgetting, entrusted this to a certain Dharma protector, Samaya. Furthermore, looking at her biography, in this cave and in that cave, she underwent exceptional ascetic practices. But through this ascetic practice, later the afflictions in her mind stream were truly gone. And she took the true most profound teachings of Guru Rinpoche and hid them as termas one by one, recording them. It is all like this. Indeed, we can also see in the biography of Sarah Kondro, it seems her afflictions were also quite heavy, just like an ordinary woman. I also mentioned in the preface many of the afflictions that ordinary women have today. Hers were quite deep and heavy. She often wanted to commit suicide. She lost all self-confidence. But she had one special characteristic. She was always very respectful towards her masters. Later, including the complete works of Tulku Driman and Tertan Garab, they were all propagated by her. So among women there are indeed, including Guru Rinpoche's Dakini Mandarava at that time, she was also quite extraordinary. She was also a king's princess. Her memory was also exceptionally good. Generally speaking, for women, some are truly women filled with afflictions, who might only bring many obstacles to the propagation of the Buddha Dharma, and nothing else. But some have extremely sharp wisdom, and they don't have the jealousy of ordinary people, nor do they have various kinds of deceitful minds, relying on such causes and conditions. Sometimes it seems the biography of Dakini Yeshe Tsogyal is highly valued abroad. I have told you this before. When I went to Harvard University back then, there was a professor who was teaching the biography of Dakini Yeshe Tsogyal. The first time I went, she was teaching the part where Yeshe Tsogyal was raped by several men. But indeed, at that time, when Yeshe Tsogyal suffered this rape, she later completely liberated all those men who raped her. At that time, it seemed those people at Harvard hadn't reached that part of the story. Later, I watched to see where they were in the text. Later, she said there was someone, a friend of hers, who heard of a rape incident in Nepal as well, and then mentioned Seattle in the northwest of the United States, where another such incident was encountered. Their topic of discussion later shifted in that direction. But indeed, they also said later, at that time, according to them, if someone did such a thing to her, it would be impossible to have compassion for him or have the intention to liberate him. One would constantly hate him. But Yeshe Tsogyal is different from ordinary women. she possessed such a characteristic. So whether we are male or female, anyone can attain liberation. There are also those who make great contributions to the Buddha Dharma, including worldly people. Nowadays it seems there are many. Recently, the Prime Minister of Italy, didn't a woman just become the Prime Minister? The Queen of England, who passed away a few days ago, she reigned for 70 years. Throughout her entire reign, 15 Prime Ministers have changed. For a woman, that is quite formidable. From the age of 26 to 96 for 70 years, she could successfully navigate through several eras. Therefore some women, like the young Matangi woman and Yasodhara discussed today, wow, they are so great. Then it says below, why do you then continue to cheat yourself by standing still, merely watching and listening? You see, the Buddha starts criticizing Ananda. Look at how great these women are. As a dignified great man, Ananda, why do you deceive yourself? You are still just staying at the level of listening, watching, studying some theories, some academic knowledge. Those women who all originally had heavier afflictions than you have all attained realization one by one. You haven't even attained the fruition of a non-returner. Are you not ashamed to still be like this? So now of course, masters like Master Oe also explain here, cultivating the Dharma free of outflows is very important. If one does not practice, it has no meaning. Of course, extensive listening without practice is meaningless. If one does not even listen, it is even more meaningless. Master Oe seems to have a bit of a nuanced view on this. So someone like Ananda, compared to actual practitioners, he falls short. Compared to the young Matangi woman and him, originally there was quite a gap between them. Ananda had already been ordained much earlier. The young Matanga woman was still working at home as an ordinary woman. Later she had already attained the fruition of a non-returner, while Ananda was still like this. So not practicing is simply not acceptable. But comparing listening and practicing is very important. Comparing listening and not listening, of course extensive listening is better. Otherwise you wouldn't even know what afflictions are. That would be even worse. So what is being said here, whether we are male or female, no matter who, having extensive knowledge and erudition is also very important. But what is even more important is practice. So we must. This time I feel everyone is practicing relatively. Of course, perhaps some people sleep every day. When I get up in the morning and look, in some of the houses we are familiar with, the lights are off. During the first session they are basically all off. Perhaps it is because everyone can recite the prayers from memory. Maybe that is the reason. We will stop our teaching here.
Bandara Banma Sodargye